He's so strong. He grabbed his fingers and pulled them hard over his head. What's he doing? He's sniffing through his nose. The children are terrified and decide to cover him up. The ant heard the screams and ran over. No one could have imagined. This blow saved a big monster, and later put countless young girls in little bottles. He was indeed strange. His sense of smell was far superior to that of ordinary people. He could even smell an apple being thrown at him. More than 10 years later he was sold to a leather factory. One day the boss asked him to make a delivery. It was his first time in town. He almost passed out, because there was one smell that was really wonderful. He ran up and sniffed it as hard as he could. The girl shivered. He grabbed her hand and inhaled it, and he chased her for a long way. The girl was so scared she was about to scream. He covered her up, but he accidentally cut off her breath. He was dumbfounded. He sniffed her hair as hard as he could, smelling every part of his body. He breathed the smell into his body. Back at the leather factory, he stayed up all night. He made a decision that would later shock the whole of Europe. He wanted to keep the scent, to create a scent that would conquer the world. And how to do that? He took the opportunity of a delivery. He came to the home of a perfumer. Without saying a word, he went straight to work. He mixes the oils without any rules. The perfumer was furious with him. He kicked him out of the house, but when he came back to smell it, it was like entering a flower sanctuary. It was wonderful. He was totally convinced. The old man immediately went to the leather factory and bought him out. And he had only one request for the perfume, which I can make for you, but you have to teach me how to preserve the scent. The old man was making a fortune from his recipe, and he didn't break his promise. He started giving him lessons. He gave him the method of distillation to preserve the scent of flowers, bought tens of thousands of roses. Through a special distillation method, the soul of the rose fragrance was obtained. The next day, he put a dead cat straight into the jar, but there was no smell left. He was furious with the old man. The old man said, "How can you be so stupid? How can you distill an animal?" He fainted on hearing this. He soon became very ill. The doctor said there was no cure. The old man's money tree must not die. The unmistakable smell of that girl on the road to the afterlife. She couldn't get it out of her. Suddenly she opened her eyes and asked if there was another way. The old man immediately replied there was a mysterious technique called oil fat, but even I hadn't learned it. So they agreed on a new partnership. He gave the old man 100 perfume recipes, and the old man gave him a certificate of apprenticeship, so he could go to a place called Grasse to learn the art of oil and grease. Grasse is a perfume mecca. On the way there, he smells another mysterious scent, again from a young girl. He followed it with his nose all the way right into Grasse, to a manor house. He smelled the girl's hand and smile. From this place, yes, he became an apprentice, learned the tallow workshop, using animal fats to absorb the scent, preserving the smell of the petals as they slowly fade. What he did next, the whole of Europe was in a state of panic. He put a woman in a distillation vat, without extracting anything. Here are 13 empty bottles, just fill them with the scent of 13 maidens, and you have the power to control the world. But how do you extract the scent? He immediately improved the method and killed another woman, and then he killed another woman and covered her body with animal fat. Then he wrapped it in cloth. Finally, the hair grease was squeezed out of the cloth, and then he distilled it. Finally he had what he wanted, filling the first bottle. Soon the city's young girls were being killed one by one. Faced with this invisible serial killer, everyone was in a panic, even stared at doors and windows, but he did not hesitate. Not even a nun was spared. Until the 12th bottle was filled, there was only one bottle left. The city was in a frenzy, and the lord of the house had nightmares all night long, because his daughter was the most beautiful girl in the city. She was definitely the target of the killer, and the lord was right. The devil was mixing the first 12 bottles. His daughter was the last bottle of maidenhair, and just as he was about to strike, when he smelled the scent leaving the city, that was the lord of the house running away with his daughter. He immediately went after her. With his nose, he crossed the mountains. He saw him clearly disguised as a man. That's when they found the evidence of his murder. He was pursued by a heavy force. He didn't care, dived into the girl's bedside and raised his stick. He paused for a second as the girl turned her head, but no beauty could stop his determination to make incense. At the final moment of concoction, his pursuers arrived and pinned him back. He was tortured and beaten, and he deserved it. The day of the execution was anticipated by all. The sky was filled with hate. Everyone wanted to see this monster tortured. He was pulled out like a dog. Then he secretly took out a bottle of something, and then a carriage drove towards the place of execution. Out came a man in fancy clothes. The men in the front row knelt down to him. It was like seeing a king. He walked slowly to the front of the stage. All those present showed eyes of adoration and happiness. The executioner on the stage knelt down directly to him. He pulled off his hood and shouted that he was innocent. Then everyone shouted that he couldn't have done it. He took out the bottle again, putting a drop on his handkerchief, letting the scent out. They all fell to their knees in disbelief. Then he threw the handkerchief into the wind. The expressions of all the people were plunged into utter bliss, greedily reaching for the handkerchief. The moment he hit the ground, everyone was in ecstasy, kissing and hugging those around him. He cried, but not with joy, interpreting the original maiden in his mind. No perfume more powerful than his, and with his death, never to be found. Even if he could bring a king to his knees, even if he could control the world, what could he do? He left Grasse and went back to Paris, back to the market where he was born. He poured the whole bottle of perfume on himself. The eyes of the people around him suddenly glowed. They jumped on him, not just to hug him, they ate him up as if he smelled like the best thing ever. Not a trace of him was left behind, not a trace of smell left. To not have and to have lost is the greatest pain one can feel. That's true. It's useless even if you have a girl's 13 cents.